Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undercooled. Today, it's my immense pleasure to introduce my good friend Gerard Mourou, who I've known for like 20 years, 25 years, something like that. Yeah, when he told me I have to come down and use his lasers. And I said, why? There's nothing on the femtosecond timescale in materials except maybe the attempt frequency to make a hop. But it's only successful 1 out of 10 to the 14 times. So who cares? And Gerard said, it doesn't matter. My lasers are beautiful. You just have to come use them. And it seems like a silly thing to say, but boy, was he bright. I went down and I used his lasers, and I have discovered so many interesting things with materials that now we've been able to increase mass transport in solid materials without melting. We're getting liquid-like transport. It's like increasing diffusion 14 to 20 orders of magnitude, all because of this short time interaction and the enormous electric fields you get when you squish all those photons together. You just rip out the valence electrons, and the atoms are already vibrating. And when you release those electrons, it just drifts, and all the bonds soften, the band gaps collapse, then they come back, and it's this incredible symphony of things that just happens. And it's what I've come to learn from Gerard, it's deterministic, because we push the material into this incredibly non-equilibrium state, and it's amazing. But I digress. Today we're going to be talking about undergraduate research that I've been also involved with Gerard on a many-year journey. But Gerard, why don't we start by having you tell us, how you got into academia and how you ended up at Michigan, because that's where I met you and where I spent a lot of time with you.
Well, it's a very long story, of course. I have to make it short. Okay. But I came to Michigan because before that I was in Rochester, New York. So it's been in Rochester, New York, is where with my wife, we came for the first time, almost the first time, to the United States. At Rochester, New York, I was working in a laboratory for laser energetics. Okay, and this was something which was established by the DOE, to study fusions at universities. Fusions, but with the laser. And fusion with lasers, really require long pulse, long and high energy pulses. So, but where I was at the laboratory for laser energetics, that was the name of the place, I also had the idea to work on very, very short pulses. And why that? And because with short pulses, and this is what's nice about lasers, about light. Light, you can compress light. You can stretch light, if you do it properly, of course. And so I was excited about one thing, about just the opposite of what the lab was doing. The lab was doing long pulse, high energy, to do laser fusions. And for me, I was more thinking about very short pulses, very, very short pulse in the beginning, of course, picoseconds, 10 minus 12, and then femtosecond. And why that is because there's something which is very interesting. If you have short pulses, if you produce short amount of energy, with a short pulse, you are producing extremely high power, like that. For instance, if you take 1 joule, which is a very puny amount of energy, because you eat zillion joules for your breakfast, and so if you take 1 joule, but you are producing this 1 joule in one picosecond, which is something now. But, well, you have a terawatt, okay, which is of course enormous, because a terawatt is 5,000 times a nuclear reactor of gigawatts. Okay, so that was fascinating to me. Okay, and I was, attracted by this logic, trying to get shorter and shorter pulses in order to get higher and higher peak power. But once you get peak power very high, you get also other things. For instance, okay, you have the light pressure now. Light has pressures, and but if you have these very, very powerful pulses, you can produce very extremely high pressures. In fact, it's one of them now. The way we can produce very high pressures is by using light and to compress things. So that was it. And I was very lucky, because University of Rochester at that time, I met very good students. The first one was Wayne Knox. Wayne Knox, who became after that the director of the Institute of Optics. Also met Steve Williamson. Steve Williamson also was a fabulous guy. And also I met my Nobel co-laureate, Donna Strickland. Okay. And so that was already, of course, a memorable time. So when I was at Rochester, we developed with Donna this technique where we can really produce extremely short and intense pulse, okay, by starting with a short pulse, but instead of trying to amplify it directly like this, if we are doing this, the problem is immediately you come up with very high power. The pulse has high power, and then he has so much power that he can really destroy, your optics and so on. So you cannot do that. So we conceived an idea where before the amplifications, we were stretching the pulse. Stretching the pulse when we started by a factor 10, but now it's more like by a factor of millions. But if you stretch the pulse by a factor 10 or 100 millions, then what you do is you decrease the power of this pulse by 1,000,000 times. So you can amplify the pulse 1,000,000 times better and with the same energy. Okay? And you can get 1,000,000 times the energy, because you are not limited by the pulse. So and then when you have harvested all the energy from your amplifiers, you can compress it. And by compressing, then you get very high power on a very, very short time scale. And so this is really the technique that we call CPA, for chirp pulse amplification, that everybody uses now in laboratories. And this is extremely important because you have a lot of applications. The applications, you know, ranges from the medical, you know, to the nuclear, and so we can. There's a lot of societal application. It's what is really attracting me about this technique. It's a societal application, and for instance, okay, you can produce very high peak power, so you can produce particles, you know, high energy particles, because with these very short pulses, you can accelerate particles, okay, and you can accelerate, you know, say over giga electron volt, you know, and if you want to do that with a conventional system, this giga electron volt system would be immense, okay. It will be maybe hundreds of meters in size, and we can do it over centimeters, for instance.
So Gerard, you mentioned earlier that you worked with Wayne Knox and with Steve Williamson, who were both undergrads.
And Dan Blumenthal.
Okay, so let's.
If you want me to tell you the story about working at night.
Yes.
Okay.
So how did you actually first meet them? How long had you been at Rochester? And how did you meet these students?
Well, I mean, this is, I was, as I said, you know, at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics. And when I, you know, as I said, when I came at the lab, I realized that maybe that was not the type of things I was working would like to work with. And I was more passionate, more intrigued at the time about very short pulses, the possibility of using short pulses, making short pulse, you know, at that time it was in a picosecond time scale. I was fascinated by that, you know, a time where the light can propagate only 100 micrometers. So that I was fascinated by that. So I came at the lab of laser energetics, and you have all kind of students and so on, and it was a very friendly place. And some of the students, like Wayne Knox and so on, you know, started to hear from me about femtosecond pulses. The rest of the lab was working with nanosecond pulses, okay? But myself, I was working with femtosecond. I'm sorry. Well, at that time, it was picoseconds. Okay, a thousand times shorter than nanosecond, and they were fascinated. And what we were doing at the beginning was, with one, we were trying to use light to switch power. Okay. And the switch was called Austin switch at that time. Taking the semiconductor lasers, semiconductors, not lasers, semiconductors only, and we were, you know, painting 2 electrodes and put some power, and this with light. We were shining the laser on this piece of semiconductors, which was silicon, and then we were shorten, you know, the gap, and we could switch power in picosecond time scale. This is what was a novel thing, of course, because you can, at that time, using conventional or switch, you know, you could switch power, but it's more like in microsecond scale or something. But now, by using the laser and by using this switch, you know, we could switch power in a picosecond time scale. And that was very, very important because, for instance, if you can do that, you can now start to observe events in this time scale, in a picosecond time scale. You know, that was really fascinating, and Wayne Knox was fascinated by that. Now with Steve it was something else. We had at that time what we call strict cameras to observe, you know, events, very fast events, you know, in a picosecond time scale. And so in order to observe this event, first we send the pulse on what we call a photocathode. And the photocathode, you know, transform light photons into electrons. Okay? And when I saw that, I said, that's interesting. What we could do is we could do electron diffraction. You can put a piece of you know, metal or something, and we can look at electron diffractions. And now we can look at the diffractions in a time scale of a picosecond. So that means if we are with the laser, if we induce, say, a phase transition, like solid to liquid, you know, by using the laser, you know, we are going to provoke a phase transition, you know, liquid to solid to liquid. Then, with this, the fact that I can, with this very short electron pulses, I could really see, you know, the phase transition taking place in a picosecond time scale. That was also very, very, it was something, maybe one of the best experiments I ever done.
And he was an undergraduate.
He was an undergrad. And that was, with Wayne Knox also, he was absolutely undergrad. And I don't know, I guess I was able to attract them because I was proposing funny idea to explore. But we were absolutely the only one in the lab to do, you know. And I think they were attracted by that.
And so they stayed and did graduate work with you?
Yeah. Except it was not for Steve. Steve stopped at the when he didn't really finalize his PhD, but he was absolutely capable of getting it, you know. He was. Another student, which was also undergrad, was Dan Blumenthal. And Dan, one day, and this is what I liked, you know, I could, because this young guy, this undergrad, was so incredible smart and passionate, but they could stay in the lab and so on, and we could really work on very incredible projects. And so with Dan Blumenthal, I told Dan, you know, if we were really taking this pulse, you know, and we were producing, I mean, when, you know, I'm talking about Austin switch now, if we are switching this gap, you know, we are going to provoke, you know, a radiative emissions, but this radiation is going to be in gigahertz or petahertz. Oh, I'm sorry, terahertz. It's going to be microwave. It's going to be microwave. So we have a very nice, a very elegant way to make microwaves these ways. And he showed that, very nicely. And I don't go into the story about, about Dan. I was very demanding to the student. But I was demanding, I think, because they love it, so nothing could stop us, so we could stay at night and so on, and it was fascinating. But Dan Blumenthal, it was just the first days he was working with us, so he was not used to that. Okay, so when I gave him this problem of producing microwave with switching Austin gap, I thought that he will do that in just before he went to home, or maybe he would come back and do the project. So the next day, and that was on a Saturday, on that Saturday morning, I called him. I called Dan, and Dan, of course, was sleeping, and he was his roommate. Picked up the phone and said, "I'd like to talk to Dan Blumenthal," and so Dan came on the phone, and he said, "So Dan, so how do you get results? How is it?" Well, of course, he was completely, first he was very impressed, but this advisor called in, in the morning, but of course, it was funny because it was, of course, he was not used to that. But after that, he picked up that very, very efficiently, and he became a very hard-working student.
Was that the beginning of recognizing that terahertz could be developed with?
Oh yes,
generated?
We did it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. With Austin, because Austin also recognized that.
Oh,
and
really?
we did that at about the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, Steve Williamson turned that into a whole company.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And of course, when Knox went to Bell Labs, which was the most, at that time, the most incredible lab in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, prestigious lab, yeah. And he did so well also. So all the students who stayed with me, I think did very well.
Right.
And of course I don't want to miss Donna, because she got the Nobel Prize.
Right.
With this technique that we developed to produce very high intensity pulses. This CPA technique where before we amplify the pulse, we stretch the pulse, we amplify and then we compress it. And of course you have to do it, we have to be careful, to do these manipulations, otherwise you destroy your pulse and it's not working. But anyway, so she showed it, and after that, 20 or 35 years later, got the Nobel Prize.
So when you left Rochester and came to Michigan,
yeah.
I presume you continued to have undergrads working in your lab all the way through because you had such a good experience with them.
Yeah.
But at Michigan, very quickly after you got there, you won the STC and created the Center for Ultrafast Optical Sciences. And that was the first time you had a research experience for undergraduates site that I believe Herb ran for you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So was that something that you thought was a good idea? Is that something that helped the whole center, do you think?
Certainly, but I mean, this trying to get this STC also was really a huge experience, right? Because it was the first time that the NSF gave money, to a group of faculties, because before these STCs were established, NSF exclusively was giving money to single PI. Okay, and in 1990, it was 1990, yes, 95. They started. I'm sorry, 1999. Sorry again. They started now to push the faculty to work together. At that time, of course, the faculty was tested on their own. They had to demonstrate, they had to do their work independently, and they were very, very strict about that. The value system, was such that it was doing it. And but they created this STC, the Science and Technology Center, to incite faculty to work together.
Right.
And so I was coming just, from Rochester to Michigan, and they had now, for the first time, they were announcing this program. We applied for this program, STC, and with what 15 faculty, other faculty, across the physics, chemistry, and so on, optics, of course. And we got one. That was absolutely, only very few were granted. So you always have about 200 applicants, and they were selecting 10. And I got one, because it was of course the ultra high intensity CPA things would help me, because it was completely a novel regime in optics. And I wouldn't say I was lucky. I think we deserved it, but and so that's the way things started at Michigan.
Right. So the REU site, you had many people come through, because your program lasted for the full 13 years that NSF allows those to go. And so you probably had, over 100 alums of your undergraduate program. Where did some of those students end up? Because I think some of them did very, very well, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Usually they were doing well. Okay. I'm talking about, they joined major labs, major universities, and so on. Yeah.
Right. And so then, when the sunset for the STC happened, that was about the time I think you approached me with the idea of let's go for an REU site, but have students go to France. Can you tell me how that happened?
Yeah, well, science, of course. First of all, I had a very nice experience with undergrad. I have to say that they were really especially good undergrad. And so I moved back to France, and then I saw you. We knew each other of course, before that. You were also very, really excited about the short time scale, what we could do with short time scale. In material studies, of course, with short time scale, you can, of course, do a lot of things. And you were excited. And then I moved to France, and when we stay connected, and NSF, was starting this REU, and we say, well, why don't we have one at the École Polytechnique? Yeah, and we did.
Well, we weren't successful at first.
Yeah.
Because I believe at first we said we wanted to bring 60 students over. And they kind of laughed at us. And they said, we're not going to give it to you, but why don't you try it with just one student to demonstrate you can do it. So I remember you were at LOA at the time.
Yeah.
And so we found a project for one student. I believe that we paid for it. Teresa Pollack, a faculty member at Michigan at the time, actually paid for the money for the student to try it. And then the next year, because we demonstrated, we had evidence, we were able to get 6 students to go.
Yeah, yeah. And now, how many students?
Well, we've settled on 8. For a while, we were as high as 15, maybe 16.
But how many students total?
We've had about 110, 120 alums now, but we have Ted, one of your other PhD students who is a faculty member at Michigan. He had a MRSEC, Materials Research, and I forgot what it stands for.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had asked for an international component to the REU that they were supposed to support. So he asked me if he could add some students. So he said, sure. I checked here and it was okay. And so we grew a bit, but it's hard to have more than 8 or 10 students. They come here and stay completely on their own. And of course, you had suggested that the students stay at Cité Universitaire because that's an awesome place for the students to stay. And it's also close to where you live, so you were able to support them if they needed it.
It's close to a nice, a beautiful park, and
Right.
they can go to the city very easily. And so
That's
on.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people always said, well, why don't they just stay out at École Polytechnique? And you told me how it was when you stayed here for a little while. It's okay if you don't want to do anything on weekends or nights. But these students like to enjoy Paris weekends and nights because there's just no transportation at those times.
That's right.
And boy, they loved staying at Cité Universitaire.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to thank you for.
Plus, you have all these city, all the students coming, from all the country in the world,
And even those that are studying at the Sorbonne stay there.
Yeah.
Those that are studying at at Col de Mine, all of those places, they're all students.
Absolutely.
So that has worked out incredibly well. And so, I just have, I feel very indebted to you for helping us make this program work so well. We've been doing this since 2009 now. So that's 15 years we did. We couldn't do 2 years during the pandemic. But we're back doing it again, and some of our alums are faculty at some universities. Other of our students go and work with our friends in the ultrafast community. One of these students worked with Enam Chowdhury at Ohio State, and others go and work, at University of Colorado or wherever. And so,
that's right.
and many go to work with our colleagues at QS. So Ted has had one of the students, John Whitaker had one of these students, I've had 2 of these students, and one of those students went to Sandia National Labs, and he's doing ultrafast laser research there, and he just hired my last Optics in the City of Light student, Alex, who's now a full member of technical staff there,
Yeah.
working with Mike Abire. And Mike even got him to actually finish the paper we've been working on for 2 years. So we're getting it done because Mike wants to reference it in something he's doing there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been an amazing experience watching these undergraduates contribute and grow and then become part of the whole optics community.
That's right.
And so, and I know you've seen this for twice as long as I've seen this, and it's...
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say, we have to give you a lot of credit.
Oh, no.
Because, I mean, the stumbling blocks, were numerous, and yeah, thank you, Steve, for these undergraduates and this program. Keep this program going.
Well, but thank you for inspiring it and being there to help whenever we've needed it, because it's been very, very useful.
Mm.
So I guess, what advice would you give other researchers about welcoming undergrads into their labs?
The advice?
Yeah, what would you tell other researchers?
Well, I mean, for me, I had such a great experience with undergraduates. I built, maybe just take the example of Donna. When she worked with me, she was undergraduate.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, no, she was early graduate, but very, very, she didn't have a lot of experience. And the first paper when she wrote got her the Nobel Prize.
That's awesome.
She was this. I mean, this is crazy. So this is just to, I'm saying that it's not exactly. She was not exactly undergrad, but I mean, she was close to it, and she was very. That was her first truly experience in graduate work. Okay, and she did maybe her first paper. She got the Nobel Prize, and she was the third woman to get it for over 150 years. So this is not 20 or not 30 years. Yeah. So this is remarkable.
Yes.
So I recognize the value of undergrad, because undergrad and sometimes junior graduate, have this passion about their work, and that.
So, what advice would you give undergrads about doing research, and how would you tell them to take advantage of the opportunities that they're often given?
I think they have really they have to choose something they love to do, and they have, after that they have to pull everything they have to realize it. Once again, I'm talking about Donna. It's going to be difficult to have another Donna, because it's so incredible. Plus, you don't know that you got Donna only 35 years later. Yeah.
And is there anything else that you'd like to say about your passion for research and how you share it?
Yeah, I mean, passion, yeah, this is true that is something that I love, and because it's so exciting, and the fact also you are kind of paid, or you can sometimes, even if you are not paid a lot, like when you're a student, but just to do something very exciting. Discovery. I mean, when you demonstrate something for the first time, this is an incredible moment.
Yes.
When you do something that nobody else has observed,
Right.
or nobody else has seen because they thought it was impossible, for instance. When you get that, you know, it's incredible.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I had to say, I really enjoyed when you were at Michigan. I enjoyed how every week you'd have everybody working, come together in a meeting across all the different areas people are trying to use ultrafast lasers to discover new things. And you asked everybody what's going on in the lab, and we all shared. And that was one of the most inspiring parts of my week, every single week. And it usually created new opportunities and ended up, it was really nice. And we don't do that anymore because for whatever reason, it's just not happening. And it was the one thing that reminded me, you know, I was a postdoc at Bell Labs. And I think the best part of my day at Bell Labs was lunch. Because you would sit down with the other people from the lab and you'd talk about what's going on in research. And it's where so many great ideas would come out. And it all just goes back to what you said. It's all about being passionate and being excited about when someone, even if it's not you, just sharing in the experience for someone else of discovery. It inspires you to go out and find your own things to then share. And it's, I think it speaks a lot for us as humans that to really advance science, we have to recognize we're part of a community. We don't do this on our own. We do this as part of a team.
Of course.
And it's really nice. So is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we end our time? I really want to thank you for pointing out how valuable undergraduate research is, not only for the student and the experience they get, but also it contributes massively to science.
Yeah. And you know, this is it's an incredible, I mean, this is a possibility to have this opportunity to do research undergraduate at the undergraduate level, right? In already going into some new places and being supported for that. This is an incredible change.
Yeah.
You know, so fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Gerard, and thank you all for listening. And so we'll see you next time.